Welcome to the Dibley Diaries for this week. This week we're going to be thinking about what it means for each of us to be a member of the royal family in God's kingdom and what implications there are for us because of that. But there is this peculiarity in the Church of England, and I wanted to talk about it as part of the Rural Challenge today, is that we have in the Church of England, the King is the head of the Church of England, and we have some practical things that we need to do about that. When we're ordained and when we move to a different job, we have to swear allegiance to the King. We have to do that. That's just what you have to do, and it might seem odd, but we just do it. We just understand that's part of the job of the Church of England. However people feel about it, they just do it. It's peculiar, but it's not as peculiar as the places in the Church of England known as royal peculiars. There, people are really very directly reporting to the King. They're directly responsible to the King. There's no bishop overseeing them in the same way. So that's even more peculiar, these places where you have to think, if you're there, would the King approve more directly of exactly what I'm saying at any point? So this is a peculiarity for us in the Church of England, but mainly we're just getting on with being the church, as we have done in the churches across England for centuries. So whilst it might seem really odd and strange to other churches or to people coming in from different countries, this is how it works for us, and mainly we are just getting on with being the church. Thought for the week this week is based on the two really quite complex passages that we have in Matthew and we have in Romans. I'll put the link to them in the description. But I've been thinking about the things that they have in common. So in the Romans passage, it talks very much about us being heirs, joint heirs with Christ. And what does that mean for us, that we're adopted and we're heirs like Christ in God's kingdom? And then the Matthew passage is really complicated. And it talks about, at the end of the Matthew passage, about actually those people in the kingdom who have been shining with righteousness in the kingdom and what's going to be like for them, and it talks about us being God's children as well. So I think I've really been focusing this week on these thoughts about us being heirs, us being God's children, but also about what does that mean because God is king of his kingdom. God is king of his kingdom. Now, many years ago, I went on a church weekend away, which was led by Jennifer Rees-Larkham, and it was a very moving and very touching weekend, and she talked at the weekend about us all being princes and princesses in God's kingdom. What did it mean for us that we were all God's children, his heirs, and we were all princes and princesses in God's kingdom? I'm not sure I really want to use the word princess in some ways, because it can have a lot of negative connotations. I mean, a princess can be seen as someone who's only into girly things, only into pink, only into not doing all the work or getting away with not doing the correct amount of work in a situation. But there are, of course, other examples of princesses. I'm thinking in particular of The Princess Knight by Cornelia Funk. I don't know if you've ever read that book. It's a brilliant children's book. And then I don't know if you ever read the book The Queen and I by Sue Townsend, and it just has this lovely bit. It's a fantasy where the royal family moved out of Buckingham Palace and end up being moved on to a social housing scheme. And of course Princess Anne is driving the moving truck, because Princess Anne has the class of licence for driving those sort of HGVs. because she drives horse boxes. So princesses don't need to be always the kind of way that we might think of them, or the way that they would be portrayed negatively in today's society. Only positively. But what does that mean for us to be heirs and to be working in God's kingdom? What is it that we do for God? Because we're not serfs, we're not enslaved people in God's kingdom. We are heirs in the kingdom. We are joint heirs, and one of the reasons we're going to be singing Be Thou My Vision in our Sunday services is it talks about being an heir, being God's inheritance for us. So what's the difference between working in a kingdom where you're the heir and working in a kingdom where you're not? Well, it's to do with motivation, isn't it? It's to do with what we do. It's to do with how we do it. We are working towards one thing, but that doesn't mean that we need to be all the same. It doesn't mean that we need to be all the same. We can think about all the positive things that we are building up in God's kingdom, not out of necessity, but out of a sense of belonging. Now, I never, ever, ever want to say that we need to earn our place in heaven, because we don't. That's theologically very unsound. We don't need to earn our place in heaven. It's through God's grace and all those things you've heard me go on about over the years. But it does change our motivation when we think about the fact that we are heirs of the kingdom of heaven, and we work in what in English parlance often is the firm. We work for the good of the kingdom. We're not all going to do the same things in the kingdom. We don't all have the same gifts. We don't all have the same abilities. But we are going to work for the good of God's kingdom, because we are princes and, dare I say, even princesses of God's kingdom. And we work for the good of that kingdom through that motivation, whatever that might look like for us. The Dibbling moment of the week. This week is something which happened to me a long time ago as part of a country pursuit that I was watching. So I was watching a polo match, and it happened that two princes were playing polo in this polo match. It was being live commentated, and one of the princes really mucked something up. And I was like, oh no, what is the commentator going to say? Because they can't really be rude or say anything derogatory about a prince, can you? In fact, I was really impressed with what he said. He said, well, that went better in practice, acknowledging that a mistake had been made, but actually that wasn't necessarily expected. I thought that was a very tactful response from the commentator. Well, that's it for the Dibbly Diaries for this week. I pray that you and your village, however large or small, have a really blessed week where you can all find your role in building up the kingdom of God.